That's right. It's time to talk about everybody's favorite subject, which is our knives. Now, I've been making knives since I think 2012 as a hobby. I've sold some, given some away, but I've designed my own knives for a reason, and it's because they do what I ask of them. So you'll hear some people talk about don't use your knife for this, or don't use it for that, or only use it for this, or never use it for that. Um, if I have a knife, I plan on using it at will for whatever I decide in the moment. So if I decide I want to beat on it, guess what? I'm gonna beat on it, and if it breaks, I know the guy that made it, and he'll make another. It'll be okay. Now, that being said, you don't want to abuse your knives and them end up broken in the field when you need them most. So it's kind of a tightrope walk, right? Um, a lot of these guys lately are just made out of an old file. That's what this guy is. It's an old file. This is a micarta handle, which is a synthetic handle, and it has a lot of different attributes to it, which translate to very usability for the purposes that I intend to use it. Now, I have a few different examples of knives that I made over the years, and different ways that they can be used based on their design. So some of them may have a thicker stock or thickness to the metal, and other ones may just be a little bit more nimble in the hand and able to get in and do some tight end work. Um, but that's not even really what we're talking about today. What I wanted to bring to you is the concept of this part right here, which would go otherwise overlooked or underappreciated. So what is this guy here? This we call the butt of the knife or the pommel. And depending on what you use it for, you're going to adopt one of those two typical terms for this feature on a knife. Now, a lot of knives, especially in the survival or bushcraft world, aren't going to really have this feature where you can take advantage of it. This is more looked at like a tactical knife feature because of the way that a pommel is designed to be used on a person, from what I understand. Now, I'm not a knife fighter by trade, but from what I understand, that's the majority of the way that people would intend to use a pommel, hence the word pommel when you strike something with the butt of the knife. So, what I use a pommel for is to pummel things like if I was going to work on wild edibles and I needed to crunch things up, I might use the butt of the knife to do a little bit of light work on that. Or I would use cut a piece of wood and use a baton if I, needed to do that in a lot of cases. But what I do use this for, and the reason why I've adopted that on knives that I make, is a really exposed tang or pummel on the butt of these, is because I had made a knife and I actually meant to bring it, but I've given it to my wife. It was a knife which I didn't leave the pummel exposed, and it chipped one of the scales. It was a wood handled, very pretty knife, but I was staking it into a log to do some work with the knife. And when I did that, I misstruck with driving it in, staking it into a tree trunk, and it actually chipped it just a little bit to where it's a cosmetic blemish. Now, it was not severe enough to really impact the usability of the knife, hence that's why I gave it to my wife. But I remade the knife with my micarta scales, and I exposed the pommel, or exposed the tang. As a quick aside here, I wanted to come at you in the future in post production and just show you kind of what that knife looked like and why it's important to maybe think about having an exposed tang as a good feature. So you could see this is the knife I was referencing, and it did not have an exposed tang. That's why it's chipped. Very nice knife, but I hate to rework the knife handles. So what I did was made a new edition of that knife. Now, it's not going to be quite as aesthetically pleasing, but as you can see, it's going to be more functional in that regard, that it has an exposed tang to use for the idea of staking it in and maybe making some feather sticks or working some cordage or doing various tasks where you might want to have an exposed tang in order to do that. So this is a full tang blade. You can see that the scales are sandwiching the stock or the metal, and then you have that exposed tang. Now, what I like to do is when I'm practicing survival techniques is I will drive this in, or what I call stake it into, a tree or a piece of wood or a stump or some type of backstop where it's a sturdy, solid backstop where I can drive this into and it's not going to rattle around and move around and bob around and stuff. So it'll give me a way to actually use this in a stationary way without having to do the work by hand, because the knife is stationary. It's held in place by something bigger than itself, something big and heavy like a tree where it ain't going nowhere, right? We have tons of cordage. We staked our knife. And we can do a lot of other things, like we could make some feather sticks, process some wood, whatever you need to do, where you would need a stationary knife to where it takes it out of your hand and you have a little bit more stability, and you don't need all of the little play that would, maybe you had a wrist injury, or you just want to have a very stationary, very stable way to cut. This is definitely one way to get it done that I think a lot of knives are just lacking. So if that helps you, just look for a knife with that attribute. All right. Do try to share this with somebody and ask them to subscribe as well. And I appreciate all of your views, like I said. So we'll see you on the next one.